Lenore's doing it too, right? I joked. Do you not realize it yourself? She countered with a question. Puzzled, she then explained with a gentle smile. Since reuniting with her, my expressions had become richer. This change had positively impacted my image at work, which had been rather gloomy, according to our nursing director. I felt embarrassed. Indeed, since I started visiting them, I had been looking forward to each day, counting down to when I could visit again, and finding motivation in work for those days. I never imagined being evaluated in such a manner. And although I had been far from promotion, talks of becoming a supervisor had started. Actually, I had another piece of news I hadn't shared with them yet. After hearing my story, they teased me, which made me blush. Since reuniting with her, a doctor from the same hospital had asked me out. My work and personal life had suddenly brightened, thanks to them. Expressing my gratitude, Lenore said. It's a quality you've always had. Ethan, eager to contribute, chimed in. All right. Since Jody has been reborn. Wondering what he would suggest, Lenore and I excitedly focused on Ethan. Let's make today the birthday of the new Jody. Ethan raised his glass high. Lenore and I followed suit. And we toasted together. Happy birthday! Thank you so much for taking care of the kids. Margaret, my son's wife, said cheerfully. Don't mention it. We were looking forward to seeing our grandchildren too. I'm relieved to hear that. Taking care of the grandchildren is truly a pleasure, isn't it? Then, with a sly smile, Margaret makes an outrageous demand. Since it's such a joy to see your adorable grandchildren, I'll be charging $500 per child. You're joking, right? Margaret stops laughing and replies with a serious face. I'm not joking. I'm entrusting strangers with my precious children. It's only natural to ask for a rental fee. Strangers? A rental fee? I felt sad hearing the words that came from Margaret's mouth. Without showing any remorse, Margaret continues. For example, men who don't have girlfriends pay to go on dates with women, right? It's the same thing. My husband, Mark, and I exchanged looks of disbelief. If that's your attitude, we won't be taking care of the grandchildren. Neglecting your parenting duties? This is why the elderly are disliked in society these days. I'm sorry, but I have a plane to catch. Margaret, wait. My name is Elizabeth. With my beloved husband, Mark, I've lived a life of over 40 years, side by side. It's been a journey too complex to describe in just a few words, filled with endless struggles. But I believe these hardships only deepened our bond and made our time together invaluable. We married in our 20s and struggled to have children for a while. Both sets of parents were eager to see their grandchildren, which gradually put a lot of pressure on me. But Mark was always there to support me gently. He cooperated with fertility treatments and would even visit places said to bless couples with children after work. Thanks to his efforts, we were blessed with a son, David, on our 10th wedding anniversary. David was frail as a child, needing constant attention. But Mark did everything he could to support me, making parenting never feel like a burden. David grew up without major illness or injury and became the star of his high school basketball team, showing just how resilient he had become. Although he struggled with his studies, he managed to graduate from college and started working as a salesperson at a well-known electronics manufacturer, where he met and married Margaret at the age of 30. When our first grandchild was born, Mark, perhaps reminded of our struggles to conceive, sobbed uncontrollably. Despite all our hardships, we overcame them together, and now in retirement, Mark and I enjoy a leisurely life. We haven't seen them in a while, but I wonder how the grandchildren are doing? Mark often says, looking out the window with a hint of loneliness. David now has 4 children, and it seems he and Margaret are getting along well, but they're both busy. And opportunities to see the grandchildren are rare. They live far from us in the city center, making visits difficult to arrange. We hesitate to intrude, knowing they're busy, and it might be a bother. Sometimes David calls asking for financial help, understandable since raising 4 children must be costly. The oldest grandchild is starting school next year, isn't he? We need to buy a present. It would be nice if they could come over for a long holiday. I wonder if they're too busy. Every time a children's special airs on TV, we eagerly await the day we can see our grandchildren again. Then one day, we receive a call from David after a long time. "Mom, it's been a while. How have you been?" "We're as usual. But how about you? Is everyone doing well? You should bring the grandchildren to visit sometime. Dad has been looking forward to it." "Everyone's fine here, so don't worry about us. And we were thinking of bringing the kids over to visit soon." "Really? Dad will be so happy to hear that." Mark is currently out in the backyard, working in the vegetable garden. Imagine how happy he'd be to know David and Margaret are bringing the grandchildren over. "And there's something we'd like to ask you about the kids." "What? Is it about money again?" "It must be tough with school expenses and all, I understand." "Thanks, as always. We really appreciate it. But this time it's a bit different. Actually, we're planning to go on an overseas trip soon, and we were hoping you could look after the kids while we're away." "Overseas? That's quite sudden." "Oh, that's right, you two haven't had your honeymoon yet." "Yeah, both Margaret and I have been so busy, we never found the time. But last week, Margaret won a pair of tickets for an overseas trip in a raffle." "Oh, in that case, have a great time. So, when are you bringing the grandchildren?" "We'll all come over this Saturday, so please wait for us. The kids are looking forward to seeing Grandpa and Grandma." "Is that so? Then I'll prepare some delicious food and wait." Even after hanging up, my excitement couldn't be contained. When Mark came back from the field and saw my face, he asked with a smile, "What's up? You seem like you've received some good news." Mark, who has always been by my side through happy and sad times, can instantly sense even my slightest emotions. I told him about David and Margaret coming over. "Really? That's exciting." On the promised Saturday, David and Margaret arrived with their 4 grandchildren. As soon as their car stopped in the parking lot, I couldn't wait any longer and rushed out the front door. "Mom, it's been a while. Glad to see you're doing well." David, getting out of the driver's seat, greeted me with his usual smile. As the grandchildren emerged from the back seat, they all started running around energetically. I smiled at the sight, thinking they must have been bored during the long drive, but then I noticed something off. Their clothes seemed a bit dirty. Faded with time, some were torn or frayed. Considering they have 4 children, I thought they might be financially strained. But Margaret, stepping out of the passenger side, was dressed beautifully. She was in modern, bright casual fashion with fancy accessories. The contrast between her and the grandchildren's attire was shocking. "Hello, Elizabeth." The strong scent of her perfume made me cover my nose involuntarily. Margaret, seemingly unaware of her overpowering smell, headed inside. "We'll leave the kids with you and head out right away." Back inside, the grandchildren were already running around, with Mark desperately trying to catch them. "Try to escape from Grandpa." "Dear, I understand you're happy, but please don't overdo it." Mark was already out of breath and patting his back. "I want to ride on Grandpa's back." As one grandchild climbed onto Mark's back, the others gathered around. "Elizabeth, Thank you so much for willingly taking care of the children, Margaret said with her lively tone. It's nothing. We were really looking forward to seeing the grandchildren. As I responded cheerfully, Margaret suddenly switched to a familiar tone and whispered in my ear. That's good to hear. It's truly a pleasure to look after the grandchildren, isn't it? Then, with a cunning smile, Margaret presented an unbelievable demand. Since you get to see your adorable grandchildren, I'll be charging $500 per child. I couldn't understand what she was saying at first. What did you just say? I said, since you're taking care of the grandchildren, I'm charging $500 per child. I was completely dumbfounded. It would make sense if Margaret was paying us to take care of the children, but the reverse was just outrageous. You're joking, right? Then Margaret stopped laughing and replied seriously. I'm not joking. I'm entrusting strangers with my precious children. Naturally, you should pay a rental fee. Strangers? A rental fee? I felt not just anger, but also sadness at Margaret's words. Mark, having gotten the children off his back, came towards us. Margaret, that's an incredibly unreasonable thing to say. Taking care of children isn't easy. But Margaret, without any hint of guilt, coolly retorted. What was once common sense is now nonsense. For example, men without girlfriends pay for dates with women, right? It's the same idea. Mark and I exchanged looks of disbelief. Either way, what's wrong is wrong. If that's how you're going to be, we won't take care of the kids. Are you planning to neglect them? This is why the elderly are disliked these days. Saying this, Margaret grabbed David's arm, intending to leave. David, silent, just followed Margaret without a word. Wait! We're not done talking. Mark tried to stop them, but without turning back, Margaret said, We have to go now, our flight is soon. Wait! Wait, Margaret! In a panic, I realized something and called out to Margaret. You left your luggage in the car, but what about the kids' clothes? Could you buy them? We didn't prepare any clothes for the kids. Margaret said this nonchalantly and got into the car. Make sure you send $2,000 in total, $500 for each of the 4 kids, to David by Monday. Saying this, David and Margaret drove off. What was Margaret thinking, not even preparing clothes for the children to wear? We can't let them stay in the same clothes, so we decided to go shopping at a mall far from our home. But I worried whether the 4 grandchildren would stay calm at home while we were gone. I'm worried about leaving them at home alone. I wish someone could go buy the kids' clothes for us. First, try to measure the grandchildren's sizes as best you can. I'll go buy them alone. That would be a great help. Just hang in there a little longer. Be quiet, okay? When Mark scolded them, another grandchild kicked at his leg. You bad kid! I'll show you. Seeing his sibling being scolded, they must have thought they were being attacked by a villain. I wondered how to make them understand we're not the enemy. We could only sigh. Are you sure you'll be okay alone? Call me immediately if anything happens. With that, Mark went off to town. The thought of me, an elderly person, looking after 4 energetic grandchildren alone wasn't without its anxieties. Just when I thought they were quietly playing games in the room, one would suddenly dash outside. When they returned covered in mud after ravaging the crops in the field, I was so frustrated I ended up laughing instead. There was only one set of pajamas David used to wear as a child, so I tried to rush them into the shower. But they resisted and tried to escape the bathroom. Do you take showers every day? Ever since the kids arrived, I had been concerned about a certain smell. Not just their ragged clothing, but a body odor filled the air with slight movement. Removing their clothes revealed them caked in dirt, as if they hadn't showered in days. Thinking of Margaret's stylish attire and strong perfume made me feel helpless. After much struggle, they finally showered, but then the other grandchildren were missing. Hearing the neighborhood dog barking loudly, I went outside fearing the worst and found the grandchildren throwing things at the dog.
Stop that! It's not right! Don't you feel sorry for it?
But it's really fun! Look, it's barking!
I told you to stop! What you're doing is very wrong!
Scolding them angrily made the children quiet down. Then they said something I hadn't anticipated.
But Mom always does the same thing. We were just imitating her.
I was completely exhausted. I wondered if we could really take care of them until David and Margaret returned, as my anxiety grew. Then, Mark returned, laden with bags of clothes for the grandchildren. Are you okay? You look pale, you must be tired. I'll take care of the grandchildren, Elizabeth. You should rest a bit. But I can't just leave it all to you. The children, having forgotten they were scolded, were energetically running around again. Watching them, Mark sighed and said, "Should I take action?" "Yes, I think that would be best. Continuing as things are, our strength won't last, and more importantly, it's not good for the grandchildren's education. Because we love our grandchildren, we need to help them become decent people, so I agree with Mark's suggestion." Mark and I took the grandchildren to a boarding school deep in the mountains.
It's been a while. We're in your care again.
This time it's the grandchildren? They do remind me of David. In truth, when David went through a rebellious phase and refused to attend school, we had placed him in this boarding school. Unaware of the harsh life ahead, the children looked around curiously. On the first day, the grandchildren struggled to wake up past the designated time. Likely because they were used to staying up late playing games. They finally got out of bed when a staff member came to wake them. They hadn't ever tidied up their bedding themselves, so reluctantly, I showed them how at first. Do it like this. You've always seen Mom do it, right? One of the grandchildren shook their head.
I've never seen Mom tidy up the bed.
Really? So the bed stays like that? I was astounded but not surprised given Margaret's behavior. After waking, they were supposed to gather in the hall. But the grandchildren couldn't stay put and tried to wander off, quickly being brought back by staff. The breakfast was simple, to the grandchildren's dissatisfaction.
There's no meat. It's too bland. I want instant noodles.
That's not available here, Mark said, and the grandchildren sulkily clicked their tongues but eventually started eating in silence. After breakfast, they had to clean their rooms. Having never cleaned or tidied before, I taught them how to fold their clothes first.
Go ahead, try it.
The grandchildren attempted to fold their clothes, but initially, they couldn't do it well. However, after repeated tries, they got the hang of it and could fold nearly as well as we could. Dinner also had to be prepared by themselves. The grandchildren showed a sense of accomplishment with their first cooking experience. After dinner, there was a social gathering, and although they were exhausted from the unfamiliar hard work and dozed off at first, by the third day, they seemed to have gotten used to the work.
If you treat others with consideration, good things will come back to you manifold.
The children listened intently to the staff's words.
Don't make the weak suffer or cause them pain. Don't be selfish and inconvenience others. If those around you are happy, it will come back around, making you happy too.
By the time we left the boarding school, the grandchildren had stopped being so selfish. One of them, seeing me struggle with heavy luggage, stepped forward to help.
I'll carry it. You rest, Grandma.
Thus, the grandchildren's one-week boarding school program ended successfully. On the way home, I noticed many missed calls from David on my mobile phone. Margaret and he must be enjoying their trip abroad. Thinking this, I cheerfully called